YouTubers, it's HarpyHunter89 and the voices in my head coming at you from the Duelist Den. And today I am bringing you my budget Salamangreat deck profile. I hope you guys enjoy this profile, and if you do, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on all the social media accounts, which are linked down in the description box below, so you can stay up to date with everything happening here at the Duelist Den. So let's go ahead and start with the profile. For my build, I am running 2 copies of Salamangreat Mole. Mole is a very underrated card for this deck, but it does have a lot of potential. For example, if you link summon during this turn, you can special summon this card from your hand. Furthermore, if you have no monsters on the field and this is in your graveyard, you can banish this card from the graveyard to shuffle 5 Salamangreats from your graveyard back into the deck and then draw 2 cards. So it is a very powerful card. Not only does it give you free link material with its own special summoning ability, but it also gives you the ability to draw cards if you're running low on resources. Next up, I run 2 copies of Salamangreat Mirror, yet again another very underrated card for this deck. Mirror has an ability that allows you to special summon it if it is added from your deck to your hand. Furthermore, if you do happen to open with this card in your hand or draw it for your normal draw phase, you can discard a Salamangreat card in order to special summon this monster. So again, a very underrated card for the deck. I also run 3 copies of Foxy. Foxy has a pot of duality type ability in that when it is normal summoned, you can excavate 3 cards from the top of your deck and add a Salamangreat card from among them to your hand. Furthermore, if this card is in your graveyard and there is a face-up spell or trap on the field, you can destroy that spell or trap card and then special summon this card from the graveyard. And it doesn't really have to be a spell or trap card on your side of the field. You can destroy spell and traps on your opponent's side of the field in order to special summon this card as well. So it's a very powerful card. It works real great if you're going up against something like, True Dracos, for example, that like to run a lot of back row. Next up, I run 3 copies of Spinny. Spinny can be special summoned from the graveyard if you have a Salamangreat monster on your field, and you can discard this card from your hand to give a Salamangreat monster on your field a 500 attack boost. Now, there is a lot of controversy going around with Spinny as to whether or not it should be run at 2 or 3. In my opinion, it really just depends on how you build your deck and what type of ratios you want to work with. For me, I like having it at 3, but there are some people who prefer having it 2. For me, it's just personal preference running this card at 3. Next up, I run 1 copy of Salamangreat Foxer. Foxer is very good at clearing back row as well. Foxer, you can discard from your hand if you have 3 or more Salamangreat cards in your graveyard, then return a link monster from your graveyard back to the extra deck in order to destroy a spell or trap card on the field. So this is a very good card to have. Furthermore, if you destroy a spell or trap card on your opponent's side of the field while this is in your graveyard, you can special summon this card from the graveyard. The only downside is you cannot discard this card, destroy a spell or trap, and then immediately special summon it. It doesn't work like that because you can only use 1 of the effects per turn. Next up, I run 3 copies of Gazelle. Gazelle is more or less the primary searcher for this deck, as when it is summoned to the field, you can send a Salamangreat card from your deck to the graveyard. Furthermore, if a Salamangreat card is sent from your field to your graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand. So it does have built-in special summoning ability plus a search effect. So this card is a very good card. Very great and a must-have for the deck at 3 copies. Next up, I run 2 copies of Salamangreat Falco. Falco's ability states that if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target a Salamangreat spell or trap in your graveyard and set that target to your field. And if this card is in your graveyard, you can target 1 Salamangreat monster you control except a Falco, return that monster to the hand, and special summon this card from the graveyard. So this card primarily is used to recurse or get recursion ability for your spell and traps out of the graveyard. You're not really going to use the second ability very much because a lot of the times you're going to have more powerful monsters on the field and you don't want to get rid of them just to summon Falco. But it is still a very good card. It has built-in graveyard recursion, and it's just a very good card in my opinion. Next up, I run 2 copies of Salamangreat Foul. Foul allows you to special summon itself if you normal special summon a Salamangreat monster, and it prevents your opponent from using face-down spell or traps that they have on the field, as it allows you to target 1 of them once per turn and prevent your opponent from activating it for the remainder of this turn. I run one copy of Jack Jaguar. Jack Jaguar is only needed at one copy for a couple of reasons. First of all, it is searchable from the deck. You can send this card from your deck to your graveyard very, very easily with various different effects. And it can be special summoned from the graveyard via its own effect to a zone your link monster points to. Another good thing about Jack Jaguar is it does deal piercing battle damage. Very, very good. I've actually won a game because of that piercing battle damage. And the last Salamangreat monster I have is Beat Bison. I run one copy of Beat Bison in this deck. This card is so underrated. I don't know why more people are not running this. But Beat Bison can special summon itself if you have more than 3 Salamangreat cards in your graveyard. And it does have an ability that allows you to negate card effects on your opponent's side of the field. And it is a non-targeting ability that negates those card effects. So it is very, very powerful. During the last regional I was at, I actually used Beat Bison to defeat Thunder Dragon. So this is a very, very good card, very, very powerful. Running it at more than one copy is a little bit cloggy in my opinion, so you're really only going to need one because it is searchable. You can special summon it off of Mirage Tahlequah. So it's a very, very powerful card, but you don't want to run it at too many copies. For the support monsters, I run 3 copies of Lady Debugs. When Lady Debug is normal summon, you can add a level 3 or lower Cyberse monster from your deck to your hand, so very, very good card to have. And of course, I run the 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring for obvious reasons. For the spell lineup, I run 1 copy of Foolish Burial. Foolish Burial allows you to send a monster from your deck to the graveyard. So again, it allows you to use those graveyard special summoning abilities of your Salamangreats. 1 copy of Fusion of Fire. Fusion of Fire is in here for obvious reason. It allows you to clear off your opponent's link monsters for a Violet Chimera. 3 copies of Called by the Grave because hand traps are a pain in the ass for this deck. 3 copies of Circle. Circle has 2 distinct abilities. The first is that it allows you to search your deck for a Salamangreat monster and add it to your hand. And the second is that it can protect one of your Salamangreats from being affected by card effects other than its own for the remainder of the turn that you activate this. You can only use 1 effect of this per turn, so you really have to be careful how you play it. Most people just run it for the surge effect, but its protection ability is also very, very great as well. I run 2 copies of Will of the Salamangreat. Will of the Salamangreat is a monster reborn on steroids for this deck, as once per turn you can special summon a Salamangreat card from your hand or graveyard, and if you have a Salamangreat Link monster on the field that was summoned using a monster with its own name, you can sacrifice this card off of the field, and then special summon monsters from your graveyard or hand equal to that monster's Link rating. So the higher the Link monster, the more cards you get to special summon from your graveyard with this. I run 1 copy of Sanctuary. I have seen people testing 2 copies of Sanctuary. I tested 2 copies for a while myself, but you really only need 1 copy of Sanctuary for the deck because you only need it on the field for a couple of turns, plus you can recover it from the graveyard through several other card effects. For traps, I run 2 Rage because it destroys cards on the field, and 1 copy of Salamangreat War is the primary negator, and it can resurrect itself from the graveyard if you need it to. For the extra deck, I run 1 copy of Violet Chimera. Violet Chimera is in here because of Fusion of Fire. I need a fusion monster. Violet Chimera fits the bill, and it helps me clear link monsters and put a beater out on the field. 2 copies of Mirage Tahlequah. I've seen builds with only 1. I've seen builds with only 2 copies of this card. I personally like having 2 copies of this card in the deck just because you don't always want to use your recursion abilities to get your Mirage Tahlequah back from the graveyard, but you still want to summon it that turn, so you do need the extra in case you run into those situations. 1 copy of Dark Rebellion Xyz Dragon. I know most people run Abyss Dweller, but I kind of find Dark Rebellion works better because there are instances where you have monsters that you can't necessarily beat over, and having a good beater in your deck is always a good idea. 2 copies of Balinx. Balinx not only lets you search out your Sanctuary, but it also can banish itself from the graveyard to protect one of your Salamangreats from being destroyed during the turn you use this ability. There are some people who debate about running 3 over 2. I find 2 is just right for this deck because you're rarely ever going to go into that 3rd copy, even if you do have it. And if you do need to have 3 protections from the graveyard in this deck, then you're obviously running a very, very slow build. And I just don't think having 3 is worth it. especially when 2 is working just fine for most of the builds out there. I run 1 copy of Proxy Dragon. This is in here just to help me go into my U-Link plays if I ever do need to do that. 2 copies of Sunlight Wolf. Sunlight Wolf not only allows you to recurse card your spell and traps from the graveyard, but if a monster is summoned to the zone of points 2, you also get to get monsters back from your graveyard as well. Most builds running this at 3. I ran this at 3 for a little bit, and it really didn't make a difference running 3 over 2, so I cut it back down to 2 because I can easily bounce this from my graveyard back to the extra deck through various effects and just keep going into those Sunlight Wolf plays. I run 1 copy of Hiata the Fire Charmer Ablaze, mainly for the mirror matches, but it does work with various other decks as well, such as Sky Strikers who have fire monsters that they use and whatnot. So this card is still a very, very good card to have in the deck, even maining it, because it does give you added potential. Furthermore, if this card is destroyed, you get to search your deck for a monster, so very, very good. I run 1 copy of Nightmare Phoenix. Nightmare Phoenix I primarily use in accordance with my Topologic Bomber Dragon. It's a real funny combo to pull off because you put Bomber Dragon on the field, then you put Phoenix on the field. Your Phoenix and Bomber Dragon are co-linked, so Phoenix won't be destroyed, but it clears all of your opponent's monsters. I won 2 games at the last regional I was using that combo. So it's very, very good. I don't think I'm ever going to cut it. I run 1 copy of Update Jammer. Update Jammer is very, very powerful in this deck as it does negate a lot of things. It negates all of your opponent's card effects during the turn of Cyberse monster battles, and it follows very good with Sky Strikers as it does prevent your opponent's Sky Strikers effects from really affecting you because you have to use your original attack and defense when this effect is being activated. I run 2 copies of Heat Leo. Heat Leo, a very, very powerful card in this deck. It can get you over problem monsters your opponent has on the fields. Say your opponent has something with a ridiculous amount of attack. You can use Heat Leo to reduce its attack down to whatever Salamangreat card you have in your graveyard. And further, I run 1 copy of Topologic Bomber Dragon, primarily for its ability to just wipe all monsters all on the field. It does have an ability to deal burn damage when it attacks as well, but most times you're not going to use that because you're going to be special summoning Salamangreats to the zone of points 2, blowing up all monsters on the field, and just attacking directly. But anyway, that is my profile for Salamangreats. I really, really hope you guys enjoyed this deck profile. I really, really enjoyed making this profile for you guys, and this is a very, very good deck. I hope it gave you some ideas for how to build your Salamangreat deck. But until next time, guys, it's Harpy89, and the voices in my head just want to say Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not just a game. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is life.